I call this the not-so-secrets of success because I don't think the ideas and concepts I'm going to explain here are particularly new or poorly known. As a matter of fact, your grandmother probably told you most of these at one time or another, and you've certainly been exposed to these concepts through countless stories from the time you were able to start reading books and watching movies. The challenge is that the concepts are more easily talked about than practiced. It actually makes me a little nervous to present these ideas this way. I normally present them through workshops or coaching where we have the opportunity to immediately practice the concepts, and this really increases the chances that people will successfully apply them. At the same time, I think the way that I've organized the ideas may give you some insights as to how to apply them, even by just listening to these short videos. So let's give it a try and find out. One last note before we jump in. In these talks, I'll focus on the business world and particularly leadership, but I believe that the concepts are just as applicable in social and family life. So let's get started by defining success. Now I'm going to define the term simply here, but we'll refine it in a later talk. For right now though, I'll define success as the ability to move from the situation that you have to the situation that you want. In the Austrian School of Economics, this is called the dissatisfaction gap, and it's considered to be the source of all human action. When you think about it, it sort of makes sense. We only act when we want something that we don't have. Now, for most of the gaps you have in life, you simply notice the gap and act to close it. You're thirsty, so you get a glass of water, for example. What I want to address is when we get stuck, when we want to change our situation but seem unable to do so. Now, in my experience with business people and organizations, when this happens, we fall into the trap of just trying harder and run afoul of Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If you're going to get a different result, you have to change what you do. That sounds easy, right? And yet, we keep getting stuck and we keep trying harder instead of changing our approach. Now, if I'm going to change what I am going to do, the next step is to get the knowledge or content that I need to change my behavior. I need to know how to do something differently. But I don't think this is enough. I mean, there's countless self-help books or leadership books out there, and they keep getting printed more and more every year, and yet they don't seem to help. They don't seem to be enough. T.S. Eliot actually has a great quote on this. Between the conception and the creation falls the shadow. So I think there's something that stands in between knowing and doing. What I believe this is what I call being. Now, this isn't a new idea. Lao Tzu talked about this 5,000 years ago in the Tao Te Ching. In modern organization development, we talk about knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Attitudes being at the base of change. We have to change the way we think. So, what do I mean by being? Basically, values, beliefs, habits, stories, attitudes. The way that we think, right, is what's in the gap between knowing and doing. So, let me see if I can explain this using a little example. Now, how does a person become more fit? I've asked this all over the world to different groups, and I always get the same answers, right? You exercise and you eat right. So we know what to do, and yet here's what we actually do, right? And the question is why? Well, we create stories, we create excuses that allow us not to do the things that we know we ought to do. We see this in organizations. Often there's, the Dilbert comic strips are full of examples. Take reorganizations. Companies aren't getting the results they want, so they reorganize. They're still not getting the results they want, so they reorganize again. Now, this doesn't mean that every reorg is a bad thing, but often it's used with the idea that the structure is what changes everything. When this isn't working, another reorg isn't going to change anything. You may have to look someplace else. So in the end, if we're going to make a sustained change in the results that we get, we have to do something different. We do have to know how to do that, but usually when we're really stuck, it's about the way we think, or what I call being.